Hey, guess what? I've finally finished all the wiring on the house. Everything's tied in and wired the way that it should be. And before it was a real mess. I don't know if you ever noticed that. But anyway, this episode might be a little bit more technical than some people could thoroughly understand. But I think you can probably get the gist of most of it anyway. So anyways, for you folks that are more technically inclined and have written me all these messages about, hey, I want a detailed information on how your place is wired up. So we're going to go through that in this episode.
In between screwing the deck down, I made some peanut butter cookie dough this morning. It's been in the fridge for an hour. Steve's like, we have lots of sun, so maybe make something. So I decided on peanut butter cookies. Anyway, it's probably my favorite cookie to make. It was the first one that I remember anybody showing me how to make, and it was my babysitter, Cindy Besaw, up in Traverse City, Michigan. And anyway, she was an awesome babysitter. I think she wanted to be a mom her whole childhood or something. And I was like her little project. But here we go, peanut butter cookies in the convection oven.
Okay, so I'm going to go through all of this stuff, and in this picture here you can see that all the wires are just sort of hanging out any kind of which way, you know, especially in the solar panel combiner box that I have. They were really hanging out of that. It's not. And there are reasons that I didn't do some things to code. mostly because there are some parts of code that are just totally ridiculous, that make no sense. Now, back in the days whenever I could build a house and go down and get a building permit for 80 bucks, and if things looked safe and made sense, it all passed. It doesn't quite happen that way anymore. Nowadays, it's more about like them making you buy this certain product in order for you to pass code. Like we have to buy special circuit breakers that are all inside the house, the arc fault interrupters, which are absolute garbage, and most people pull them out and then put something cheaper in to replace that. So who does that benefit? The circuit breaker manufacturers, not you, because you have to put something in there that'll work instead of the garbage that they force you to buy. So, and I could go on and on. That's just one example. You know, everything from whether the fire block they make you put in the walls, on and on and on. But anyway, even here in Hawaii, even if I were to build a code, they would not let me wire my house myself because you have to hire a contractor. Again, it's all about spreading that money around and spreading the wealth around, and what little wealth I have, I enjoy hanging on to very much. So another reason that this isn't to code. I'm not going to hire a contractor to do something that I damn well know how to do. So that said, let's start having a look here. I'm going to start out with these combiners here. I'm going to switch over to this phone camera here. But this box here, you can see that I've got 5 breakers. Well, I have up on the roof, I've got 5 rows of 5 columns of solar panels. So I have 5 that are wired in series, and then each of that set of 5 comes down to one of these combiner breakers here. So these 2 breakers and this 1 breaker, these 3 all come from the left-hand side of the house and go to this left-handed inverter for the charging. These 2 in the middle here, those come from the right-hand side of the house, and then they go out to that inverter over there, and that inverter takes those 2 sets of panels. So I've got it split up where 3 go into one inverter, 2 go to the other inverter, and they both can charge the batteries. So it just helps distribute that a little bit, because the most of wattage that you can put into one of these to charge with is 4,000 watts. Well, I've got 7,000 watts of panels, so I had to break it up, and that's how I elected to do it. So all the panels that I've got on the left hand side of the house come into this screw terminal here, and then the ones from the right hand side of the house go to this screw terminal. A lot of people I know kind of curious why I've got 2 inverters. Well, I've got one inverter, this one here on the left, that does both 240 volts and 120 volts. These cannot be paralleled because they're the, I think, GE model, that you just can't parallel them. And when I bought them, it was the only thing that was available. They've got them out now where you can parallel them. But what I've got here is I've got one, this one runs basically the house. This one over here runs the hot water heater and the car charger. And most of that's done in load diversion mode. So this inverter, it doesn't run very often. It only runs during the day, and when it runs, it works hard for a living, because that car that we have, when it's charging, requires 3,500 watts, 3.5 kilowatts. So it takes a lot of power. That guy really earns his living when he does work. This guy here is on 24/7, and I've got this inverter here where it goes into this transformer. I've got everything open so that everybody can see exactly how I've got it wired. But you see this black wire right here, and all the black wires go to that. This is the wire that goes to the transformer. This comes in from the inverter, and that goes out to the breaker panel. You notice I've got 10 gauge wire coming in and 8 gauge wire going out. And there's a reason for that, but I'm not going to get into that right now. All my grounds are bonded together. I'm really big on grounding things properly. This blue wire just simply ties into the case of the transformer box, so it's grounded along with everything else. And then this, let's see, where's it? This red and white wires that I've got here. The red wires, the two red wires, one of those goes into the transformer, and then this white wire comes in from the inverter. So these two guys right here, this wire nut and this wire nut, are 240 volts from the inverter. The way I get my split phase is this is from the transformer, and it's the center leg out. And you can see that this wire here is like 12 gauge instead of 10 gauge. It's really small wire for the split phase out of all of this. The neutral is what this actually becomes. And this wire here, the reason that you can do a smaller wire for your split phase, for your center wire, is because, well, think about it. If you've got 10 gauge wire, you can run 30 amps. And if you've got 240 volts, you're running 30 amps on one side and 30 amps on the other side. And then in the neutral wire, so if you've got 30 amps coming in onto that and 30 amps from the other side coming in, that's 60. You're running twice the electricity of what NEC allows you to do. Well, the reason that you can do that here is because if I've got, say for example, two 1,000 watt loads, I've got a 1,000 watt load on one leg and another 1,000 watt load on the other leg, and that load just simply cancels each other out on that middle line. So you basically have a voltage divider. So there's nothing really returning on that center neutral line, because you got the as one is on its negative polarity, the opposite one's on its positive polarity. They cancel each other out, and the neutral line just doesn't really even see anything. So the only time that the transformer really comes into play is whenever that load starts getting imbalanced, where you got one leg that's pulling more power than the other. But if you plan your circuits out good enough, then when that happens, you're usually going to be pulling two heavy loads at the same time that will be on opposite legs of your power. So the transformer for your split power actually has to work very little. It's very rare that it has to really put out a lot of effort. So we're going to look at this other side here. You can see this breaker panel here. That is for this inverter on the right. And you can see here I've got the water heater and the car, and that's really all this guy powers. And then we've got this breaker that runs everything else in the house, the different rooms. I've got one here that is security, which is also the internet. I've got one that's timered, and the timered circuit is actually controlled by this sewn off in this box over here. So if I hit this light, if I hit this button, you'll notice it gets dark in here because my studio lights will go out. So I hit that, and now the lighting's kind of poor, and I hit it back on, and then the lighting comes back up. This timered circuit runs different outlets in the house that I have wired in various different places. So by me having these outlets that are on timers throughout the house, I can have the smart house functions turn all these off at night, because the TVs, when they're even off, the small one that we have still draws 10 watts when it's off. Even though it's dark, not doing anything, the Wi-Fi part of it's still on and operating and functional. So we plug all of those items into these outlets that we have scattered through the house, going through this, and then so at nighttime, about, I think it's 9 o'clock or somewhere around there, it just turns off. So if we've got Christmas lights on the house, it'll turn them off at 10 o'clock. The televisions, all that kind of stuff, just go off at 10. So that's what this box is for. Now this box here, it's got number 10 wire going through it, and it's got 120, 240. It's the split phase, full split phase, and it's going to go out to a little guest house and shed kind of thing and run some security that we have down the driveway for motion sensing and beam brake detection and that kind of thing. So that's what this is going to be for. It's also part of the smart house, but when we have people come to visit, then this will be the supplying the power to that. It'll even have its own little water heater, and all that'll be powered through this. The last thing that I want to talk about now is grounding. If you've watched my videos on my channel, you know that I'm a huge proponent of grounding. I'm really big on grounding. Grounding is important. And the way that I've got my system done here is everything terminates back to this main breaker panel. And in the electrician world, there's what they call grounding and there's what they call bonding. Bonding means that all of your grounds are bonded to each other in a box. So like this box here, you'll see that I've got 3 wires going to ground. 2 of those come from the solar panels, and then the other ground comes outside the box, goes up through the little hole there, and down around this way, down to the bottom, and then it goes up into this box, and then it ties to this ground bar over here. I also have another ground bar over here. And then I've got the main ground wire that goes all the way down and out of the house to the ground rod. So this box is tied directly to this box. The inverter, these are also grounded. So the inverter grounds from that, and then it goes up and then over to this guy, where it's bonded to the ground of that unit, and then that ground comes over and around and comes down to this guy, and then it's grounded inside of here also. So everything's tied in here. Same thing with this inverter. Let me get down here where you can see just how that's wired there. But you see that I've got one of my 240 volt legs here, the other one's here, and then my ground wire is right here. So that's grounded back. If we trace this wire out, it's grounded, goes up this orange cable, over and across, and then up, and then into this box. And then we've got all the grounds from everything that comes into this box run into that ground. This relay is the relay that handles the car charging, and this is the signal wire that comes in, and the signal wire originates on this inverter here. So when the battery voltage gets up and this inverter says, oh, the batteries are full, then it closes a contact in this relay, which energizes this relay that starts the car charging. And then when the voltage falls down below 50 volts, this guy says, oh, let's turn that off. So it turns the relay off in here, which shuts off this relay that stops charging the car, and the batteries never get drained too far. I've also got the same thing going on over here. This inverter, I've got this signal wire. I don't have it hooked up yet, but it's going over to one of these gray boxes here so that I can have the relay make a contact in that given certain voltage or whatever. If I've got a use for that later on at some point in the future, then I'll have access to it over here, and I could hook it up to one of these Sonoffs and have the house smart system make some decisions based on that feedback. But if I ever do have something like that, I'm probably actually going to do more like a analog to digital converter right off of the batteries. So that's the most likely scenario. Okay, and then on this box here, you'll see that I've got a ground wire coming out of the top over there, and that's a 10 gauge ground, and it goes up and over and then it comes up and down and inside of this box, and then it ties to its ground bar also over here. So another thing that I like to do is keep all of my wiring nice and neat, so all of my hot wires are coming in, and then I've even got them tie wrapped together. It just keeps everything neat so you can trace it all out easier, makes it a lot nicer. So this is how it's all wired up, and to some people it's real informative, to other people they have no clue what I was talking about. And don't feel bad if you don't know what I'm talking about, because most people don't. It doesn't mean you're not any less intelligent than me. I just got more book smarts. I'm still pretty stupid a lot of times. I don't know when to come in out of the rain. But anyway, this is the system. And if you have any questions, post them down below and I'll be happy to answer them as good as I can. Hopefully I covered everything here. So y'all have a good one. Thanks.
Well, the cookies are done. And what's really fun and neat for me is I'm cooking in an altitude and humidity that I grew up cooking in. Colorado was very different for me, being such a dry state. And these are made with, I use erythritol sugar blend because we both do kind of like a little bit of a keto diet, ketosis. But there you go.